You spent years trying to be a good person. So why do you still feel exhausted, unseen, and trapped? What if the prison ruining your life was built from your best qualities, and the most dangerous lie you believe still sounds like virtue? There's a kind of suffering that almost nobody notices at first because it does not look ugly from the outside. It looks responsible, it looks mature, it looks like kindness, patience, self-control, loyalty, sacrifice. It looks like the life of a good person. And that is exactly why it is so dangerous. Because some of the people who are falling apart the most are not the reckless ones, not the loud ones, not the obviously broken ones. Sometimes it is the person who is always understanding, the one who keeps the peace, the one who swallows the hurt, adjusts their needs, lowers their voice, and tells themselves they are doing the noble thing. They become so skilled at being reasonable for everyone else that one day they wake up and realize they have disappeared from their own life. What if I told you that many people are not suffering because they are too selfish, too weak, or too lost? What if they are suffering because they have spent years becoming the wrong kind of good? That is the unsettling thought I want to begin with today, because I believe one of the cruelest prisons in life is not built from failure. It is built from a beautiful self-image that slowly turns against you. A self-image that whispers, be patient, be useful, be understanding, be low maintenance, do not ask for too much, do not be difficult, do not disappoint anyone. And little by little, without even noticing, you stop living from your center and begin living from performance, fear, and silent self-abandonment. This is the kind of pain that does not always announce itself dramatically. It shows up in quieter ways, in the tightness in your chest when you are alone at night, in the resentment you feel and then immediately judge yourself for feeling, in the exhaustion that sleep does not fix, in the strange emptiness of doing everything right and still feeling as if something essential in you is starving. I have been thinking deeply about this for a long time, and the more I sit with Stoicism, the more I reflect on human behavior, and the more honestly I question my own patterns, the more I keep coming back to one uncomfortable truth. Not everything that looks virtuous leads to inner freedom. Some habits that earn praise from the world can quietly destroy your relationship with yourself. That is why this conversation matters. Because maybe your life is not heavy only because of what happened to you. Maybe it is also heavy because of the invisible mental code running underneath everything. The code that tells you your worth comes from being needed. The code that tells you love must be earned through self-erasure. The code that tells you your needs are dangerous, your emotions are inconvenient, and your value depends on how well you can carry pain without becoming a problem for others. And if that code has been running inside you for years, it can start to feel like personality. It can start to feel like morality. It can even start to feel like destiny. But it is not destiny. It is conditioning. It is survival. It is unconscious programming. And once you see it, really see it, your whole life begins to change. Welcome back, everyone. This is at Luvuong Travel Co 5. If this kind of deep exploration speaks to you, subscribe to the channel and support the journey. That support genuinely matters because it helps this channel keep creating the kind of videos that do not just entertain for a few minutes, but stay with you long after the video ends. What fascinates me about Stoicism is that it does not flatter us. It does not hand out comfort just to make us feel better for a moment. It asks something much harder. It asks us to look directly at the hidden forces ruling our lives. It asks us to separate what is true from what is merely familiar. It asks us to examine the judgments, reflexes, and emotional habits that shape our suffering long before the world ever touches us. And that is where this journey begins, not with easy motivation, not with a list of life hacks, not with shallow positivity. It begins with a more dangerous question. What if some of the things you are proud of are the very things keeping you trapped? What if your endless patience is not peace, but fear of conflict? What if your self-sacrifice is not love, but fear of rejection? What if your understanding nature is actually the habit of abandoning your truth so that others will stay comfortable around you? What if the identity you have spent years protecting is the same identity that keeps you exhausted, unseen, and inwardly divided? That is not a comfortable question. I know that. It goes against everything many of us were taught. We were raised to believe that goodness would protect us, that if we were kind enough, calm enough, tolerant enough, and useful enough, life would eventually return the favor. We thought that if we stayed decent, we would be rewarded with peace. But real life is more brutal than that. A person can be deeply kind and still be used. A person can be loyal and still be forgotten. A person can be disciplined and still feel empty. A person can spend years being admired for their strength while privately collapsing under the weight of a life that no longer feels like their own. That is the hidden tragedy I want us to uncover together, because I do not think most people are simply lost. I think many are sleepwalking through patterns they never consciously chose. They are being shaped by emotional wounds they never named, beliefs they never questioned, and internal rules they inherited so early that they mistake them for truth. Then one day they look around and wonder why their life feels so tight, so repetitive, so strangely unlived. This is why I want to invite you into something deeper than information. I want to invite you into recognition. In this video, we are going to begin exposing the hidden patterns that quietly drain inner power. The patterns that make a person look functional on the outside while feeling fractured on the inside. The patterns that keep people obedient to pain, loyal to illusion, and disconnected from their own center. And if you stay with me until the end, I want to show you something even more important than the patterns themselves. The possibility that what you call your fate may actually be a script, and that script can be rewritten. Because the prison may not only be around you, part of it may be in the way your mind has learned to survive. And if that is true, then what we are doing here is not just self-improvement. It is an act of recovery, a return, a quiet rebellion against everything in you that learned to live on autopilot and call it virtue. So let's begin there, honestly, not with who you pretend to be, not with who the world wants you to remain, but with the hidden self underneath all of that, the one that is tired of performing, tired of shrinking, tired of being good in ways that feel like slow spiritual suffocation. Because sometimes the first real step toward freedom is not becoming a better person. It is finally seeing the prison inside the person you became. And once you begin to see that prison, the next question becomes unavoidable. If these invisible patterns are shaping our suffering, then what is the first mechanism through which they actually control our lives? For me, one of the clearest answers is this. Many people are not truly living from consciousness at all. They are living from reaction. They are moving through life as if they are making choices. But what is really happening is that their emotions are seizing the wheel before their deeper self ever has a chance to speak. This is one of the most important truths I have learned while reflecting on Stoicism, and honestly, one of the hardest to admit about human nature. Most of us like to believe we are rational. We like to believe we act with intention. We like to think that when we explode, withdraw, panic, overthink, or attack, it is because the moment demanded it. But if we are honest, many of our strongest reactions are not really about the present moment at all. They are echoes. They are old wounds finding a new stage. They are buried fears wearing the mask of certainty. Think about how often one small event can hijack an entire day. Someone says one careless sentence and suddenly your chest tightens, your mind sharpens, and an invisible trial begins inside you. A partner uses the wrong tone, and now you are no longer just hearing that sentence. You are hearing every time you felt dismissed, every time you felt unseen, every time you had to swallow pain and pretend it did not matter. A boss gives a strange look in a meeting, and now the mind is no longer in the room. It is spiraling into prediction, humiliation, danger, self-doubt. A child makes a mistake, and the frustration that comes out of you is not just frustration. It is fear. Fear that things are falling apart. Fear that you are losing control. Fear that you are failing in ways you cannot repair. This is what makes emotional captivity so dangerous. It is not just that emotion feels intense, it is that emotion can become a kind of temporary ruler. In those moments, you are not responding from your highest awareness. You are being driven by a force inside you that feels urgent enough to become truth. And the tragedy is that while it feels true in the moment, it often leaves behind destruction that your calmer self would never have chosen. I do not say that with judgment. I say it with a kind of sober compassion, because emotional reactivity usually has roots. People are rarely too sensitive for no reason. They are rarely irrational in a vacuum. Behind the outburst, the panic, the withdrawal, the obsession, there is often an old psychological wound that still has not been fully understood.
Did you try the new blend?
A person may look overly defensive, but underneath there may be years of feeling judged. A person may seem overly needy, but underneath there may be a life shaped by emotional inconsistency. A person may appear angry all the time, but underneath there may be accumulated shame, helplessness, and the deep pain of having once felt powerless. This is why Stoicism, at its best, does not teach contempt for emotion. It teaches rightful placement. Emotion is not the enemy. Emotion is information. It tells you that something in you has been touched. But the problem begins when information becomes command, when a feeling becomes a verdict, and when a reaction becomes your identity. I have come to believe that one of the most powerful shifts a person can make is learning how to pause in the presence of emotion without immediately obeying it. That sounds simple, but it is not small. That pause is where freedom begins. Before that pause, you are a hostage. After that pause, you become a participant again. Sometimes that pause lasts only a few seconds, but in those seconds, everything can change. The first thing I think matters in that moment is naming what is happening inside you with brutal honesty and precision. Not everything is ruined. Not they always do this. Not I cannot take it anymore. Those are the dramatic stories emotion tells when it wants total control. Instead, something much cleaner. I feel anger. I feel fear. I feel shame. I feel rejection. I feel threatened. I feel powerless. That may sound almost too simple, but naming creates separation. It is the difference between drowning in a wave and stepping back just far enough to recognize that it is a wave. The moment you can say, I am feeling anger, instead of becoming anger, there is already more consciousness in the room. There is now an observer. There is now a self that is not identical to the storm. The second thing is to return to the body, because the body is often where emotion turns into momentum. The breath gets shallow, the jaw tightens, the hands clench, the chest contracts. The body begins preparing for battle, even if the actual situation does not require war. This is why breath is not a cliché here. It is a tool of recovery. A slow inhale, a longer exhale, relaxing the face, loosening the grip of tension. These are not minor gestures. They are signals to the nervous system that it does not need to keep escalating the emergency. And then comes the deeper question, the one I think most people skip because it asks for self-honesty instead of self-justification. What is this emotion trying to protect? Under anger, there may be a wounded need for respect. Under panic, a desperate need for certainty. Under jealousy, a fear of not being enough. Under defensiveness, the terror of being exposed as inadequate. Under resentment, a history of giving what was never truly voluntary. When you ask that question, you stop treating emotion as an enemy to crush or as a king to obey. You begin treating it as a messenger whose message must be interpreted carefully. And that is a very different relationship with yourself. But emotional captivity is only one layer of this inner prison. There is another form of suffering that is quieter, more socially acceptable, and in some ways even more exhausting because it hides under the surface so well. It is the suffering of living inside the tyranny of should. I think almost all of us carry around an invisible script for how life is supposed to unfold. People should understand us without explanation. Partners should know how to love us properly. Friends should show up exactly when we need them. Hard work should always pay off. Loyalty should always be returned. If I do my part, life should do its part. This script is often so deep inside us that we do not even realize we are reading from it all day long. And when reality fails to follow the script, something in us collapses or revolts. What hurts us is not always only the event itself. It is the silent accusation we make against reality for not behaving the way we expected it to behave. That is why disappointment can so quickly become bitterness. Not because life denied us one outcome, but because life disobeyed an internal law we never consciously examined. This is where Stoicism feels almost severe in its honesty. Reality does not owe us obedience to our private script. It does not sign contracts with our expectations. It does not promise to match the story we wrote in our minds. And the longer we keep demanding that it should, the longer we keep turning ourselves into prisoners of disappointment. The deeper suffering is not only "this happened," it becomes "this should not have happened." And that second sentence is often where peace dies. I do not think the answer is to become cold or to stop hoping. Hope is human, preference is human, desire is human. But there's a profound difference between saying, "I hoped for this," and saying, "This had to happen." The first leaves room for disappointment without destroying your center. The second turns life into a courtroom where reality is always on trial. That is why one of the most liberating inner shifts is replacing "should" with something humbler and truer. Not "they should have chosen me," but "I wish they would." Not "life should reward my effort," but "I hoped my effort would lead somewhere better." Not "they should understand me automatically," but "I wanted to be understood. And now I must decide how to respond to the reality in front of me." That change sounds small, but emotionally it changes everything. It takes you out of war with reality and places you back into relationship with it. You stop demanding that the world erase your pain, and you start asking what truth the moment is actually revealing. And once you begin to live that way, another subtle trap becomes easier to see. The tendency to confuse what you feel with what is real. And that subtle trap leads us into something even deeper. Because once you stop fighting reality quite so blindly, you begin to notice another weakness in the mind. Its desperate need for simple answers in a world that was never built to be simple. I think this is one of the quiet reasons so many people stay stuck for years. They are not always lacking effort. They are not always lacking intelligence. Sometimes they are trapped because they are trying to understand a complex life with a childish map. They keep looking for one cause, one villain, one mistake, one magical answer that will finally explain everything. And when they cannot find it, they either become bitter or they become passive. There is something in us that hates complexity. We say we want the truth, but often what we actually want is relief. We want a conclusion that feels clean enough to hold. We want to point somewhere and say, "That is the reason. That is what ruined it. That is what must be fixed." Because the moment life becomes layered, uncertain, and difficult to reduce, the mind gets tired. It loses the comfort of certainty. It can no longer pretend that one label will save it from confusion. So, when an investment fails, a person may say, "I was just too greedy," or "that person misled me." When a child struggles, someone may say, "They are lazy," or "technology ruined them." When a relationship collapses, the whole story may get reduced to "they were toxic," or "we were never right for each other." And sometimes there is a grain of truth in these statements. That is what makes them seductive. But the problem is not that they are always false. The problem is that they are usually far too small for the reality they're trying to explain. Life rarely breaks for one reason alone. A failed decision may involve emotion, poor timing, blind optimism, weak preparation, hidden pressure, unrealistic expectations, and a simple lack of experience all at once. A struggling child may be carrying anxiety, shame, poor sleep, social insecurity, family tension, and a learning environment that does not fit the way their mind works. A broken relationship may involve unspoken needs, mismatched attachment styles, ego wounds, emotional immaturity, inherited family patterns, and years of misunderstanding that neither person knew how to name. But many people do not want to see that. Complexity is humbling. Complexity removes the pleasure of easy blame. Complexity forces us to think in a way that demands patience, maturity, and restraint. And for a mind that wants control, that can feel unbearable. This is why oversimplification is not just a thinking error, it is often an emotional defense. If I can reduce the whole problem to one cause, then I do not have to sit with uncertainty. I do not have to examine my blind spots. I do not have to admit that reality is more tangled than my ego would like. I can just blame, conclude, and move on. But that kind of thinking comes with a price. The price is that your solutions become as shallow as your explanations. If your diagnosis is crude, your response will be crude. If your interpretation is lazy, your action will miss the real structure of the problem. This is where I think maturity begins to take on a completely different shape. A mature mind stops asking, "What is the one thing that caused this?" and begins asking, "What forces are interacting here?" That question sounds less satisfying at first, but it opens a much more honest relationship with reality. It shifts you from blame to observation, from certainty to understanding, from emotional convenience to actual insight. And I think that is one reason I keep returning to Stoicism in my own reflections. Real Stoicism is not simplistic. It is disciplined, yes, but not shallow. It teaches you to look at life without melodrama, but also without reducing it into slogans. It teaches clarity, not convenience. It teaches you to face reality as it is, which means accepting that many outcomes are shaped by multiple causes, not one neat explanation that flatters your wounded pride. In a strange way, travel taught me something similar long before I had the language for it. When you move through different places and see how differently people live, think, love, struggle, and survive, it becomes harder to keep clinging to simplistic judgments. You start to see how environment shapes behavior, how culture shapes expectation, how history shapes identity, and how two people can live inside the same world but be carrying completely different psychological realities. That realization does not erase personal responsibility, but it does deepen your perception. It makes you less arrogant in your conclusions, and that matters, because a shallow mind is easily manipulated. It wants formulas. It wants certainty. It wants someone to come along and say, "This one thing is ruining your life," or "This one method will fix everything." But reality almost never changes through one perfect answer. Usually, it changes through layers of awareness, small corrections, repeated honesty, and the willingness to keep adjusting even when no dramatic breakthrough appears. That is why I believe one of the most valuable shifts a person can make is learning to think in systems instead of snapshots. When something goes wrong, do not only ask, "Who is at fault?" Ask what conditions made this likely. Ask what assumptions were feeding it. Ask what patterns were reinforcing each other quietly in the background. Ask where the loop is. Ask where the pressure keeps building. Ask what part of the system you can actually influence right now. Even writing it out can change the way you see your life. Put the problem in the center of a page. Around it, name the forces connected to it: fear, fatigue, pride, avoidance, environment, money, sleep, shame, pressure, habit, unresolved conflict, lack of skill, unrealistic expectation. Then, look at how they interact. Often, the thing you thought was the problem is only the symptom. Often, the place you kept attacking was never the place where change needed to begin. That kind of thinking takes more energy. It is less dramatic. It does not give the ego the cheap pleasure of a quick verdict, but it gives you something far more valuable, a chance to engage with life intelligently instead of reactively. And in a world obsessed with easy narratives, that kind of patience is a form of inner power. Because once you stop craving one simple answer, you become capable of something much rarer. You become capable of seeing the world with more humility, more accuracy, and more depth. And from there, you are finally ready to confront another illusion that quietly distorts so many lives. The illusion that being right is the same thing as being whole. And once you stop demanding simple answers from life, you become able to face a more uncomfortable truth about yourself. Sometimes what keeps you trapped is not ignorance alone, but ego. I do not mean ego in the loud, arrogant, obvious sense. I mean something quieter and far more common. I mean the part of a person that cannot separate who they are from what they think. The part that turns disagreement into danger. The part that hears a different opinion and reacts as if it has been personally wounded. The part that would rather protect its self-image than learn something that might change it. I have watched this happen in conversations so many times, and if I am honest, I have also caught traces of it in myself. Someone offers a different perspective, and suddenly the atmosphere changes, the body stiffens, the voice sharpens, listening disappears. Curiosity is replaced by defense. What could have been an honest exchange becomes a silent war. On the surface, people look like they are arguing about ideas. But beneath that, something much more fragile is happening. They are trying to protect a version of themselves that feels threatened by the possibility of being wrong. This is one of the deepest forms of inner weakness because it hides behind strength. The person may sound confident, they may sound certain, even forceful. But certainty is not always strength. Sometimes certainty is panic with a polished face. Sometimes it is what the mind uses when it cannot bear the vulnerability of not knowing. And that is why so many people do not really seek truth. They seek confirmation. They seek emotional safety inside their own worldview. They want their opinions to remain intact because those opinions are doing more than explaining reality. They're holding together the person's sense of worth, identity, and control. So when someone challenges the opinion, it does not feel like a useful correction. It feels like a personal attack. It feels like humiliation waiting to happen. This is how the mind becomes imprisoned by its own conclusions. Because once you fuse your identity with your current beliefs, growth starts to feel dangerous. Every conversation becomes a test. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every correction becomes shame. You stop exploring ideas and start guarding territory. You stop asking what is true and start asking what protects your image. And the tragedy is that a life built this way may still look intelligent on the outside, but inwardly it becomes rigid, defensive, and increasingly incapable of real transformation. What draws me back to Stoicism here is its insistence that dignity does not come from always being right. It comes from being aligned with truth strongly enough to revise yourself when needed. That is a completely different kind of strength. It means your worth does not collapse just because your opinion changes. It means your value is not built on intellectual perfection, but on honesty, self-command, and the courage to let reality teach you. That shift matters more than most people realize, because the moment you understand that your opinion is not your identity, something relaxes inside you. You can finally let ideas breathe. You can hold a conviction firmly without gripping it desperately. You can listen without feeling erased. You can admit, I may not see the full picture yet, and instead of that feeling like weakness, it starts to feel like maturity. I think this kind of inner spaciousness is rare today, because so much of modern life rewards instant certainty. People rush to declare, to label, to take sides, to perform confidence before they have truly reflected. There is almost no social reward for intellectual humility, even though humility is one of the few qualities that keeps the mind alive. Without it, thinking becomes repetition. Without it, conversation becomes combat. Without it, a person may age, work, and speak a great deal while inwardly remaining unchanged. A simple but powerful practice is to begin softening the language of certainty. Instead of saying, "This is the truth," say, "Based on what I understand right now, this is how I see it." Instead of saying, "You're wrong," say, "I see this differently, and I want to understand where you're coming from." Instead of reacting immediately, ask yourself one private question. Am I defending truth, or am I defending myself? That question can reveal more than most arguments ever will. Because when the ego is calm, truth becomes easier to recognize. But when the ego is threatened, even obvious truth can feel unbearable. And that is why so many people stay mentally stuck. Not because life never offers them new insight, but because their identity is too crowded to receive it. And strangely enough, this brings us to another illusion that defines modern life even more visibly. The illusion that constant activity is the same thing as meaningful progress. This is a trap I think many thoughtful people fall into because it is socially rewarded and morally flattering. A person is always busy, always moving, always doing something. Their schedule is packed. Their mind is overloaded. Their day is full of meetings, tasks, updates, emails, plans, learning, organizing, fixing, responding, optimizing. From the outside, it looks admirable. It looks disciplined. It looks ambitious. It looks like a life in motion. But motion is not the same as direction, and that distinction is painful because it means a person can spend years exhausting themselves without ever getting closer to the life they actually want. They can become experts at doing while remaining strangers to why. They can master efficiency at the level of action while remaining deeply confused at the level of purpose. They can check every box on the list and still feel in quiet moments that something essential is missing. I think this is one of the saddest forms of modern suffering. Not collapse, but misalignment. Not laziness, but effort spent in the wrong places. Not the absence of discipline, but discipline detached from meaningful direction. A person wakes up tired, works all day, ends the day depleted, and still cannot answer the deeper question, where is all of this going? That question is difficult because it asks for strategic honesty, and strategic honesty is far more uncomfortable than tactical busyness. It is easier to respond to messages than to confront the emptiness behind the schedule. It is easier to stay busy than to admit you have been avoiding a more serious choice. It is easier to fill your life with movement than to face the fear that you may be moving in circles. This is why busyness can become a very refined form of avoidance. It gives the mind the feeling of momentum without requiring the pain of clarity. You can tell yourself you are trying. You can prove to others that you are hardworking. You can even collect praise for your discipline. But beneath that surface, there may still be no real alignment between your effort and your deeper values. Stoicism cuts straight through this illusion. It asks not only whether you are disciplined, but whether your discipline serves something worthy. It asks not only whether you are active, but whether your activity is governed by reason. Because effort without direction is not strength, it is drift with a work ethic. And I think that is why so many adults feel both overworked and unfulfilled at the same time. They are not lacking energy altogether. They are bleeding energy into scattered commitments, shallow obligations, inherited expectations, and low-level urgency. Their lives are crowded, but not necessarily meaningful. Their calendars are full, but their direction is unclear. And eventually, that contradiction becomes unbearable. The body keeps moving, but the spirit no longer follows. This is where a different kind of discipline becomes necessary, the discipline of stepping back and thinking strategically. Not how to do more, but how to see more clearly. Not how to optimize every hour, but how to make sure the hours are serving something real. That requires stillness. It requires honesty. It requires asking questions that many people postpone for years. What am I actually building? What matters enough to deserve my time? Which efforts are meaningful, and which ones are just anesthetics against uncertainty? If I keep living exactly like this, where will I end up? Those questions are not comfortable, but they are cleansing. Because once you ask them sincerely, you begin to recover direction. You begin to see that not every task deserves your life force. Not every opportunity is worth your focus. Not every form of productivity is evidence of progress. Some forms of busyness are just noise with a respectable costume. And the moment you see that clearly, you also begin to understand a difficult but liberating truth. Exhaustion does not prove you are on the right path. Sometimes it only proves that you have been carrying too much of what never truly belonged to you. And when you finally see that, you arrive at the most important question of all. If so much of our suffering has been shaped by unconscious patterns, then what would it mean to truly take the script of our life back into our own hands? For me, this is where the conversation stops being merely psychological and becomes deeply personal. Because once you recognize these patterns, emotional captivity, silent demands against reality, distorted conclusions, simplistic thinking, ego-based identity, directionless busyness, you cannot unsee them. They start appearing everywhere, in your conversations, in your disappointments, in your habits, in the little moments where you used to say, "That's just how I am," but now something in you knows it goes deeper than that. Now you begin to sense that what once felt like personality may have been conditioning. What once felt like fate may have been repetition. What once felt fixed may have simply been unexamined for too long. And I think that realization is both frightening and hopeful. It is frightening because it removes some of our favorite excuses. It becomes harder to keep blaming life for patterns we are now conscious of. Harder to keep calling something destiny when we can clearly see the machinery behind it. Harder to pretend we are powerless when, in truth, the first layer of power has already appeared the moment awareness enters the room. But it is also hopeful for the same reason. Because if a pattern can be seen, it can be interrupted. If it can be named, it can be questioned. If it can be questioned, it can slowly lose the authority it once had over you. That is what I find so powerful about this path. It does not promise instant transformation. It does not flatter you with fantasy. It offers something quieter and more real. The possibility of becoming conscious enough that your life stops being driven entirely by what used to happen automatically. To me, that is the beginning of freedom, not perfection, not emotional numbness, not becoming some untouchable, hyper-disciplined ideal. Freedom begins when you are no longer completely possessed by your own unconscious patterns. When you can feel anger without becoming cruelty. When you can feel disappointment without turning it into a private war against reality. When you can feel uncertainty without scrambling for false certainty. When you can hear disagreement without collapsing into defense. When you can work hard without losing sight of why your effort matters. That kind of inner steadiness is not glamorous. It will not always be visible from the outside. But I think it is one of the most beautiful forms of strength a human being can develop. Because it means your life is becoming less mechanical, less reactive, less ruled by old programs you never chose. And I want to be honest here. I do not speak about this as someone standing above the struggle. I speak about it as someone who finds this territory endlessly humbling. The more I reflect on Stoicism, the more I realize that self-mastery is not a finish line. It is a relationship, a daily relationship with your judgments, your impulses, your fears, your illusions, your habits of escape. Some days you see clearly. Some days you fall back into old reflexes. Some days you catch yourself early, some days only afterward. But even that is part of the path. The goal is not to never slip. The goal is to become less asleep while you are living. That is why I do not think the real breakthrough is always dramatic. Sometimes it begins in a moment so quiet that nobody else would notice it. A moment where you stop mid-reaction and realize, this is the old pattern. A moment where you catch yourself demanding that reality obey your script and instead choose to face what is true. A moment where you feel the urge to defend your ego and decide, just this once, to listen instead. A moment where you look at your overloaded life and admit that exhaustion is not the same thing as purpose. Those moments may seem small, but they are not small at all. They are the moments where the unconscious begins to lose its throne. And maybe that is the real invitation here, not to become someone else overnight, but to stop abandoning yourself in the hidden ways that once felt normal. To stop calling your patterns your identity. To stop calling your repetitions your destiny. To stop handing your life over to forces inside you that have never been honestly examined. Because the truth is, a human being can survive for years in autopilot. Many do. But survival is not the same as awakening. Functioning is not the same as living. And there comes a point when the soul starts asking for something deeper than mere endurance. It asks for authorship. It asks for truth. It asks to be brought back into conscious participation with its own life. So if you have stayed with me through this entire journey, I want to leave you with one honest challenge. Ask yourself, which pattern has been speaking most loudly inside your life lately? Not which one sounds interesting. Which one is costing you peace right now? Which one keeps repeating itself beneath different situations? Which one still has more power over you than you want to admit? Start there. Not with shame, not with performance, but with truth. Because truth, even when it cuts, is still kinder than illusion. And once you are willing to see clearly, you are no longer standing at the edge of change. You are already inside it. If this reflection stayed with you, leave a comment and share the one pattern you are most ready to outgrow. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, exploring stoicism, emotional mastery, inner strength, and a more conscious way of living, stay with the channel. This journey is not about empty inspiration. It is about waking up, reclaiming your center, and learning how to live in such a way that your mind no longer quietly betrays your life from within. So if we strip everything down to its essence, the message is not simply that people suffer because life is hard. It is that many people suffer twice, once from reality itself, and again from the unconscious patterns through which they interpret reality. A person may be ruled by emotion without realizing it, trapped by invisible expectations, deceived by their own feelings, addicted to simple explanations, defensive in their identity, or endlessly busy without true direction. And over time, these patterns do more than shape moods. They shape character, they shape choices, they shape destiny. The deeper lesson is that freedom does not begin when the world finally becomes fair, calm, or predictable. Freedom begins when you become conscious enough to stop handing your inner authority over to patterns you never examined. The practical lesson for life right now is this: start smaller, but start honestly. When you feel triggered, pause and name what you feel before reacting. When life disappoints you, ask whether you are resisting reality or responding to it wisely. When your mind jumps to quick blame, slow down and look for the larger pattern. When you feel the urge to defend yourself, ask whether your ego is louder than your love of truth.
That sounds like a
And
difficult
when you feel
decision,
exhausted,
but I
ask
understand
whether
why
you
did
are
it.
truly moving forward or just staying busy to avoid deeper questions. Real change begins in these quiet moments of awareness repeated every day. Now, I would love to hear from you. Which one of these patterns do you recognize most in yourself right now? Please share your answer in the comments so everyone can read different perspectives and learn from one
So
another.
here is the finalized
And if this kind of
concept.
deep reflection
The
speaks to you,
structure optimizes
please subscribe to the
natural
channel to
light
support it
while maintaining the
and help
required
keep these
density.
meaningful videos coming.